So recently, I made a video about riding CD Projekt Red's dick.
I genuinely think this is the best game I've ever played, ever. Genuinely think it's the best game I've ever played in my life. I genuinely don't think I've ever had as strong an emotional reaction as the ending of Cyberpunk 2077 in any media ever in my life. The only thing I didn't like about Cyberpunk was I was trying to roleplay and they didn't have the penis 3 option. Feels like I'm just sucking the game's dick.
But for real, guys, my last video was about Cyberpunk 2077 and about how much I truly love the game. It's one of my favorites, if not my favorite games in a long time. And that video was talking explicitly about what I enjoyed about the game and why I thought it was so great, and a little bit about the controversy. But I think it's important to remember, even though I think the game is fundamentally great on so many levels, there's a lot of things that it also does wrong. And that's not just glitches and bugs, but things that can really be a detriment to your experience. And I think in this video, we will go over exactly what I think the biggest things that Cyberpunk and CD Projekt Red have facing them with the game in the future, and what exactly they need to do to bring back their core audience who felt left down from not only a buggy release, but a release missing some key features that a lot of people were super excited about. Because at the end of the day, we've been shitting on CD Projekt Red and the developers and mostly management for a while now. The Reddit threads have been insane, and it's finally now just dying down. And I think it's more important than ever that we don't kick CD Projekt Red on the ground when they're down. It's time we pick them back up and allow them to fix the mistakes they have made and truly harness a masterpiece of a game that they have on their hands. So let's talk about it. One of the biggest complaints I see everywhere on the internet regarding Cyberpunk is how it's not as alive as, say, a game like Red Dead Redemption or GTA. How you can't go in and play arcade games. How when you're walking on the sidewalks, the NPCs don't seem to react to you in a genuine way, like, say, they do in Red Dead Redemption 2. And I have some things to say about this, because I think this is a meaningful and insightful concern to have. After all, while Cyberpunk on display looks amazing, the graphics are awesome, the city lights shine into the night, you can hear the sounds of the world as you drive by, and they're immaculate. I will say that a lot of the times, the actual AI, artificial intelligence, running all of the NPCs in the world can be a little bit lacking. While it may look awesome as you're driving down this night city and by the water and just seeing and glancing at all the great sights, when you end up running people over and then cops follow you for 2 seconds before giving up, or NPCs around you kind of bug out and don't have a reaction to you, or when you start pulling out your gun in front of people and there seems to be no genuine reaction, when you start to try and mess with different NPCs and you can now obviously tell they're void of life. I think a lot of these concerns make sense, and this should assuredly be one of the main things CD Projekt Red should focus on with the game in the short term. I think the biggest things that could easily be fixed, is first of all, police AI. I think just beefing up the AI, it's already been proven that some of the underlying systems are there, they've just been cut. Beefing up the police AI, that way they'll actually chase you more than one block. They'll, instead of spawning right behind you, they'll actually maybe engage with you. Having trauma team come in on certain engagements would be very interesting. One of the biggest complaints I see everywhere on the internet regarding Cyberpunk has to do with how the world doesn't feel alive. While it may look graphically immaculate, and while driving down the city may be extremely fun, hearing the sights and sounds of Night City and all its grunginess, it's very impactful. But a lot of players feel that when you start to dig deeper and dive in trying to meet NPCs that aren't notable, or just walking around and doing interesting things, trying to play arcade games, for example, it's lacking. While the game is very impressive at first glance, the more and more you play and start to peel back the layers, you kind of start to see where it lacks. And I totally agree in this point. There's certain things about Cyberpunk that are totally lacking in this sense. I remember many times where I accidentally ran over a bunch of civilians only to have the cops follow me for one block before they gave up, spawning behind me the entire way. I remember times where I saw arcade machines and I was interested to at least get on and try it for 2 seconds just to see what the minigame was like, and I couldn't. Something that was likely planned from the beginning of the release until it got cut. And overall, just in general, a lot of the interactions I had with non-important NPCs and story characters were lacking when compared to newer games like Red Dead Redemption 2, where you can just chase people around and they'll start getting pissed, running away, and having a genuine reaction. But I want to stop there because I want to point out something very important. For me specifically, I don't find these features as important as some other people. For example, I would always, 100% of the time, much rather have a deep and engaging story and characters and time put into those in DLCs than I would being able to play, let's be quite frankly honest, a boring arcade minigame that I'll stop playing after I do it for 5 minutes, just like every single minigame in GTA. I'm talking about volleyball and just going on dates and things. I just didn't find these very engaging because I didn't think the actual effort put into story and characters really made it engaging. So what I would think would be most important is CD Projekt Red starts to focus on AI specifically, especially regarding police and NPC interactions that are non-important. For police, for starters, I think CD Projekt Red could do a lot of beef, even quickly, that would buff the AI, make it so they don't spawn right behind you, make it so that they chase you for more than one block. And as you start progressing the system, potentially start adding in max tack, coming in to attack you at higher levels, and just more engaging police chases. But I want to stress that I think a lot of the people that complain here are a little bit off, because that's not what Cyberpunk is about. Cyberpunk isn't trying to be in a perfect GTA clone. It doesn't need to have the perfect driving and insane chase sequences of GTA. Because to be quite frank once again, I've played GTA a lot, and all that stuff, at least for me, got boring after the first time. Being chased by the police in an authentic fashion was cool, and it was fun while my friends were over, but after I had done it 1 or 2 times, it lost its luster. But what didn't for me with Cyberpunk was the characters and the story that lived with me after I finished the game. So I want to stress once again that while I think these AI systems need a lot of improvement, as it would really enhance the feeling and immersion of Night City, I think they should only be improved to a point. I don't think this should be the focus of the developers. Obviously, they were lacking at release, but we don't need a fully fledged cop system and NPCs that can react to absolutely anything you do in an engaging way. We simply need something that is bare bones and gets us by. Have cops that follow you, like I said, for a normal amount of time, and it's a slightly more engaging mini game. When you walk up to NPCs and pull out your gun, have more authentic reactions. Maybe allow players to pickpocket different NPCs for different items. It should be something pretty easy with all the items you already have in the game, and just adding basic interactions. Also, I think adding minigames would be interesting, as it does make the world feel more alive. I'm talking arcade machines and maybe playing cards with different NPCs in the world. But I think it's important to stress that, to be honest, the fans of the game, in my opinion, are overreacting. These aren't actually really important parts to making a game great. They're just parts of a game that make it one of a kind and push it beyond great. But it isn't the heart that I fell in love with for Cyberpunk. And that's why I think more than ever, after CD Projekt Red starts to fix the glitches and starts to improve the artificial intelligence system specifically for a lot of the different interactions you can have in the game, I think it's important that they once again focus on what makes this game so phenomenal in the first place. And that's the stories, the character, and the world. Because for me, as long as the AI reacts normally when I do interesting things, I can have fun police chases, bare bones, and the stealth AI and combat AI reacts more smartly to what I'm doing and poses more of a challenge, I would already consider that the perfect game for me as is. So what I think CD Projekt Red should focus on for the long term is more content. And on that front, I propose this. First up, like I said, for those content patches and updates in January and February they've already announced, hopefully they can iron out as many bugs and performance issues as possible. This game needs to be playable for players on all systems that the game was promised for, and that should be CD Projekt's Red's main priority, and it quite obviously is. Assuming that they can finish this all up by February, I think it's also important in those next 1 to 3 months after that we likely would have otherwise gotten DLC to instead focus on just improving the base experience. Improving graphical options, like I said, improving all of the AI systems, and just adding a few little mini games here and there to spruce up the world and make it feel a little more alive. And once again, these are things that I think a lot of other players want more than I do myself, but I can't argue that it wouldn't at least add a little bit to the base game that I already love. After this, though, is where I think it could get really interesting. Because even though there are some systems that CD Projekt Red needs to improve in Cyberpunk, and I've talked about those, like the AI, and those need to be fixed, there's a lot of potential in this game as well, and core storylines and systems that haven't been introduced or explored that I think could be added on in expansions. So first of all, I think a great idea for a first expansion to Night City isn't actually one that takes us to a new environment, one that takes us to the Crystal Palace or Japan or Atlanta, where one of these starting zones comes from. I think it's better to instead add a lot to the base game. And what I would propose is the first DLC should be a gang DLC. Throughout the story of Cyberpunk, there's so many interesting gangs, like the Moxes and 6th Street and the Voodoo Boys, and we meet them all briefly and have interesting interactions and get to know them a little bit. But there isn't dedicated, long-form, and engaging storylines for each of these gangs specifically. And I think this would be a great way for CD Projekt Red to introduce not only more content, but more content on the base game. This would mean that new players just starting Cyberpunk would not only have the base game and all of its hundreds of hours of content, but they would also have 6 new storylines, potentially, hopefully 5 to 10 plus hours of just getting to know these gangs, establishing new relationships, and having more meaningful choice. Because another thing that I think Cyberpunk struggled with, at least in its base game as it stands now, is choice. Because in Cyberpunk, as someone that's played this game now in 3 playthroughs, there's a lot of choice in this game. Fake choice. Different dialogue options, different ways to tackle missions. And while some of these do result in differences, in fact, some of the little changes I made early on in the game resulted in big differences at the end, a large majority of the choices you make do not impact the world in any meaningful way. Multiple of the dialogue choices I chose on my second playthrough when I was trying different options just resulted in the same exact response from the NPCs. And that took a little bit of the allure of the game away from me when I realized that while I had an amazing first experience, that's the same thing everyone else was having as well. So I think in these 6 new gang storylines, you could add a ton of meaningful choice. You could make each of these gang storylines a little mini story where you meet new characters and go to interesting environments. And most importantly, you focus on making those choices that you make impactful. And the reason this would be so great is because this would just be an addition to the game that you already had. We wouldn't have to go to a new place where it was obviously a DLC. We wouldn't have a brand new storyline. You would simply be adding on a great addition of content to the base game that would allow more choice throughout a player's playthrough, would let you get to know the gangs and explore the world of Night City. Because Night City itself is so great as it stands. As much as I want to go visit places like the Crystal Palace or the Mars Expedition, at the end of the day, Night City is the best city in a video game, period. And I don't think CD Projekt Red should waste that. I am more than okay with the first DLC just being me in the same exact environments I've already been in, just with new characters, new storylines, and a new sense of agency and choice. That would be the perfect first expansion for me. And I think you could add all of these 6 gang expansions and maybe a few awesome side missions here and there, goofy ones, on top of the base game. And if you just release that along with those new AI patches and performance increases, I think at that point, the game would be an absolute unequivocal masterpiece. So the question is, what would I want after that? And the answer is really whatever. I would be really happy if the second DLC was something along the lines of Crystal Palace, going to Mars maybe on one of the expeditions that I've heard about while playing the game on the news, checking out Japan and Arasaka, going to Atlanta, like I said, another city in the US, and maybe seeing someone under NUSA control for a short 20-hour DLC that you could just experience new characters and missions. And at the end of the day, I think that's really what I want most. I don't know what the plans at CD Projekt Red are for multiplayer with this game. I would love to have multiplayer as well. Driving around in Night City with my friends sounds amazing, and going on missions together in a GTA Online-like environment does sound phenomenal. But I think at the end of the day, CD Projekt Red has to focus on what's important first. And that's fixing the game, making it perform adequately on all platforms that it was promised, fixing the AI and the systems that, while they weren't game ruining for me on my playthroughs, would certainly enhance the experience for all players. And then from there, just doing exactly what you already did, because this game is amazing. The stories, the character, the world, the music, the immersion and experience is like no other game I've played. I simply just want more of that. So while it seems like CD Projekt Red is in a very bad spot now, they've lost so much trust from their loyal fans, their shareholders, and really every onlooker in the space. I know that the game I played and the game I poured hundreds of hours into is a masterpiece at heart. And if they can just simply smooth out the rough edges and continue to add content to this game and just finish that off with some awesome DLCs and new areas and an engaging multiplayer experience that lets everyone rejoin with their friends, to me, that would be the perfect game. And hopefully, if that can happen, in the far future, when CD Projekt Red is moving on to the next iteration of Cyberpunk that I certainly hope comes one day, they can start with all of that groundwork and knowing exactly what they need to deliver. And that just might be my new favorite game. I'll see you next time, guys.